Hi, how are you today? Thanks for coming.
I'm just saying, there's nobody. Oh, where are they? So, you have a few minutes. Yeah, I do. It's fine. Nobody else there. Jesus.
Nice to meet you. How are you? She had a big party last night. I'm surprised to see you up.
I'm surprised to see you too. Good morning.
Yeah. I'm like nothing that
Whatever, you're figuring it out.
Are you? I'm not kissing anybody. Hi.
Good, how are you? Oh, I didn't
Realize it was you.
I know, we didn't get you so hello and watch us. Thank you, we're just thrilled to be here. Oh, thank you. We're thrilled to have you. Thank you.
Yeah.
And so I was just gonna say. I saw it. I just got back.
I know I don't care, but I did have anybody do a great thing. But I still keep walking. It was not what it was necessary. No, it was necessary because I was driving 4.5 years being
And we're waiting for you.
Again, good morning and welcome. And I am Carol Weintraub-Fogel, a past chair of the Jays, Metropolitan Detroit's Book Fair, and a member of the steering committee, which helps to plan the book fair. And it's so wonderful to be back in person and to see so many familiar faces of our book fair supporters. This is our 71st annual Detroit Jewish Book Fair. It's the first and is recognized as being the oldest book fair in the country. Yeah, we have to be very proud because we set it. First, a bit of housekeeping. As you know, I'm going to ask you to silence your phones and turn off any devices that make any noise or light up. Thank you. The book fair brochures are available in our bookstore in the lobby. For further information and for book fair details, we also ask you to check our book fair website. We are very proud of our amazing lineup of outstanding authors and programs. Harvey Fierstein was so memorable last night, and we invite you to join so many of our other presentations and events for the entire week. Our fair ends next Sunday, and it'll be fabulous. It is fabulous. I helped choose the books, the authors, so I know it's fabulous. A word of thanks to all our generous donors. It is a result of our community sponsors that we're able to present most of our programs free of charge. Purchasing books at our book fair also provides funds to support this annual event and enables us to present our many incredible and well-known authors. Additionally, please shop at our online bookstore where you'll find many more hand-selected books than are here. And it's not Amazon. It's bookshop.org, shop book fair, Jewish book fair. And it's all the information is in our brochure. The book fair team would like to thank the following for their day sponsor, Chandler Family Foundation, and our sponsors, Sherry and David Jaffa. I also want to express extreme gratitude and appreciation to the whole book fair committee. Their dedication, innovation, commitment, and hard work have made all of this possible. This morning, I am so delighted to be introducing Ellen Yashinsky Chute. First of all, I'm very proud to say that one past book fair chair is introducing another past book fair chair. It is someone like Ellen who devoted 2 years to making this what it is today, so thank you. Now, currently, Ellen Yashinsky Chute is the president of Empowerment Partners. She's a clinical social worker who provides psychotherapy to individuals, couples, and families, as well as consultation in the workplace. For 24 years, Ellen worked at Jewish Family Service of Metropolitan Detroit. Ellen was Director of Behavioral Health Services and the Chief Community Outreach Officer. In 2010, Ellen was honored and recognized by the Jewish Federation of Metropolitan Detroit with the prestigious Berman Award for Outstanding Professional Services. Isn't that amazing? She's fabulous. For more than 20 years, Ellen was an adjunct professor at the University of Michigan School of Social Work. Today, what a joy for me to be saying we're presenting Ellen as one of our authors. Ellen is the author of the book, What Drives You, and What Drives You podcast. The podcast and regular blog posts can be found on her website, ellenyshute.com. Following the presentation, Ellen will be signing copies of her new book, What Drives You, How Our Family Dynamics Shape the People We Become, just outside the Janet Jarrett Gallery. Please join me in giving her a warm welcome, Ellen.
Hi, everyone. I have to say, this is definitely full circle because I was that person sitting in the back making sure everything was fine, and to be here now speaking to you as an author is really just an amazing experience. I need to say that the last time I was in this room was when my daughter, Julie Feldman, who's sitting right in that row, was presenting her book at Book Fair a few years ago. So it's sort of a family affair, and I'm thrilled to be here. So I'm going to be talking to you today about me, because I really am the subject of this book. And the books are out in the lobby, but I'm going to tell you about my journey to write this book and how my journey can also be something that might be helpful for you in your life in order to, I don't know, be happier? Would that be good? I think, yeah, especially in these times, like that would be good, right? So I'm going to start off over there. I have a pretty loud voice. Can everyone hear me? You can all hear me still, right? Yeah. No problems. Okay. So I'd like you to come for a ride with me in my car. And this is my car. I'm going to describe my car to you. I use the car as a metaphor for a family in this book. And I learned about the car in my own experience of growing up in a family. And I'm going to tell you about that experience so you have a little bit of a sense of who I am and I don't know, can you guys hear me? Yeah. I'm good. Okay. No? Would you like me to use a mic? There, is that better? Okay. I don't have to elevate my voice so much. So, I'd like you to just imagine that this is a car, and this is the front seat of the car, and I am sitting in the back seat of the car. And I like to think of a car as a vehicle or an object that drives us through life, which means that the car takes us from one day to the next day to the next day. It takes all the people in it from one day to the next day to the next day. And because we are all sitting in this car for all of those days that we grow up and that our parents are parents, there are billions and infinite number of interactions that take place within this car that help us develop into who we are. And I'm going to talk about the interactions in my car so that you can have a sense of who I am. Not that you need to know about me, but just it is a journey just like everybody has a journey in the car. So my seat in this car is in the back, okay? I'm talking to you now from a place of being around 7 or 8 or 9 years old. But I'd like to tell you about my car before I got to be that age. Before I do that, I absolutely have to have a drink of water. My mouth is so dry. Okay. So I was born, excuse me, I was a baby boomer. I was born in 1948. My mother, I'm going to tell you a little bit about my parents. My mother grew up in a small town outside of Pittsburgh. She was an only child. She was a very, very smart, creative, beautiful, beautiful woman. Can't say that beautiful enough. My daughter's shaking her head. Beautiful woman. And she grew up in what we would probably call today as an abusive home with kind of a crazy, screaming, raging mother, who I actually only met a couple of times in my life, because at my mother's first opportunity, which was when she was 17 years old, she graduated from high school and went to college and moved out of her house and basically never went back there. While she was in college, my mother was a fine arts major. She was an artist. She majored in college in dress design. And while she was in college, she met a young engineering student, and they fell in love, and they got married immediately after they both graduated from college, and then he went into the war. while he was serving in World War II, my mother moved from Pittsburgh to Baltimore, Maryland, and worked at the Aberdeen Proving Grounds there, which was part of the war effort. And she was there until he finished his service in the war and came home. And with his engineering degree, no surprise, he got a job in Detroit. And so they moved to Detroit. When they moved to Detroit, they sort of entered into a group of friends, and pretty soon after, they had me. And when I was 18 months old, they divorced. Yes. So I'm going to talk to you and tell you that because you have to imagine my car, okay? So I'm born into a family. Most babies that are born into a family sort of go into the back seat of the car, and that was my place. And at 18 months old, the person who had been the driver of my car, my biological father, was gone. And in those days, it wasn't like today, where parents talk to their kids, where there's equal sharing of children between parents. In those times, it was really thought that it was better if the biological parent just sort of went on their way and left the child to be with the other biological parent that was caring for them, which was my mother. So my biological father actually remarried pretty quickly, and he married a woman with a child exactly the same age as me. We're like 2 weeks apart, a girl. And they moved to Cleveland. And I saw him a couple of times until I was about 4 years old. But pretty much from the time I was 18 months old until I was 7 years old, my mother was the driver of the car, and I was in the passenger seat, the front passenger seat, because it was just the two of us, and we were a pair. And we did everything together. She worked, she raised me. She had a woman who watched me, who I still remember as just an amazing human. I had two of those women in my life who really are a big part of who I am today. But, and while that was happening, while I was developing from an 18-month-old into a toddler, into a preschooler, and then an elementary school kid, my mother was dating a man who was part of this friend group that they had in Detroit, who I refer to as Uncle Jerry. Okay? Now, Uncle Jerry didn't really sit in the driver's seat of this car with me and my mother. It was really me and my mother. Okay? Uncle Jerry would come. We have lots of pictures of me with Uncle Jerry. He would come, and he was a part of many of the things that we did. And when I was 6, 7 years old, I will not remember that, but whatever, somewhere around there, 6 years old, my mother apparently had given Uncle Jerry an ultimatum and said, look, either we get married or I'm out. And he said no, he couldn't really commit to marriage. He was like 35 years old and single at that time. And so my mother took me, and she and I moved to California when I was 6 years old. And I went to first grade in California at Clover Avenue Elementary School. I have no idea if it's still there, but that's one of my memories. We had been in California for about a year, and my mother said to me one day, there's going to be a surprise. And I said, okay. And she wouldn't tell me what it was, and it was happening in 2 weeks. And I waited anxiously for this surprise. I had no idea what it was. And in 2 weeks, she got me all dressed up. You're going to see a picture of me sort of looking all dressed up. And we went to the Beverly Hilton Hotel, and we go in the hotel, and we go on an elevator, and we ride upstairs to where the restaurant is, and there the elevator door is open, and there is my Uncle Jerry. okay? Now, she didn't want to tell me he was coming because she wasn't sure he was really going to come. But he came, and within a few days, I think it was like the next day, she had one of her friends come and watch me, and they went to Las Vegas and got married. Okay? So, Uncle Jerry and my mom came back to LA, and we packed up all our stuff, and we moved back to Michigan because that's where he was in business. And at that point, the car changed again. Now remember, there was a father and a mother and me in the back seat. And then for 6 years of my life, it was just me and my mom. And now, all of a sudden, I'm 7 years old, and there's a new person in this driver's seat. I love him. I was really happy he was there. And the reason why it's important for you to know that is because when I tell you about how this was for me, it's really important for you to understand what got me to this place of being in this car. So they get married. We lived like in a townhouse for a year. My father was a residential home builder. He built us a house in Huntington Woods, and we moved to Huntington Woods, and I spent the rest of my growing up years there in Huntington Woods. So my purpose for telling you all this is for you to understand life from my perspective. So already at 7 years old, there have been 2 different people in this driver's seat, each of whom were different. The first one kind of disappeared out of my life, and as much as we think kids are resilient and they don't know, kids know, kids really know, and there's been a hole in me for my whole life about losing that person that was originally in the driver's seat. And then when I get to be 7 years old, we start with a whole new car and somebody different in the driver's seat. So now my mother moves to the front passenger seat, okay? She was here and then had to be here, and then she was here. I'm back in the back. So I want to tell you about my experience of being back in the back, because that's going to help you understand why this understanding is so important. My mother, I told you a little bit about her. My mother was just a perfect person. Never in my whole entire life, until she was very ill at the end, did I ever see her in a bathrobe or without her makeup on. She would get up, she would get fully armored up with everything, perfectly coiffed, and she was beautiful, beautiful. My mother had this naturally gorgeous white hair that she never colored, that was like shocking, like you would see her in a room with her hair. So that was my mother. She was smart, she was funny, she could be really engaging and warm and nice. And to her, looks were just the most important thing. Everything was about how someone looked on the outside. And she had her, as we all do, had her ways of thinking about what was pretty and what wasn't pretty. And so this was a lot of the input that she gave to me was about how I looked in my life, a lot of it. My father, and I'm going to refer to this man, my father, as my father. When I was 8, he did officially adopt me, so I did carry his last name. And he is the person who I think of as my father growing up. My father was also a really debonair, good-looking, schmoozing, joke-telling kind of guy. When I was a teenager, he was the one that all my friends thought were just, oh my gosh, he's just incredible. And he was a businessman, he was a builder, he created a business, he did very well, and he was driving our car. at least he was in the driver's seat of our car, okay? Because my mother really never left the driver's seat, because pretty much a lot of stuff that he did was after she told him to and told him how to, and called him Jerry, and we knew something was coming after that. So these two people were in the front seat of my car. All cars have rules. Some of the rules are spoken and some of the rules are not spoken, but the rule in my car was spoken, and it was that little girls are to be seen and not heard, okay? Now you have to remember that this was in the 50s. I had already lost a driver. My job in this car was to just try to not have any more changes in it. I wanted it to stay as it was. So I took that rule really seriously. And so my job in this car was to be in the back seat, look perfect, and not have any needs. Now, if you think about your cars, people were probably talking to each other. I don't know, I'm in cars with my kids and nobody's following that rule. That is for sure, because that rule isn't there. In many of your cars, that was the place where everybody talked and everybody was heard, and there was a lot of stuff going back and forth. But in my car, there wasn't. I always think if I would have had somebody else in this other seat next to me, perhaps together we could have changed that rule, but it was just me. And so I followed the rule, which means that I grew up without any needs, without any wants, trying to just take care of myself. I learned if it's something I wanted to do, I needed to do it. Not because my parents wouldn't have helped me, but because back here I learned life was easier if I didn't ask. Does that make sense to you guys? Okay. So I grew up, I've always been a sort of a person seeker, like I'm looking for people. And so me being in the back seat was not a comfortable place for me. And my mother used to tell a story that starting from the time I was 2 years old, that, oh, I can't take her anywhere because wherever we go, she's like over at the next table. She's on someone's lap in the next aisle. And she would say this about me in a joking, but still, you could tell that this wasn't really her first choice. She would have liked for me to just sit and be beautiful. Now, the problem with sitting and be beautiful, you may wonder, because if you look at me today, you may think, okay, that's okay. Well, the problem is that I grew up a really pudgy little girl. And this did not fit in my car. It just didn't. And really, unfortunately, I'm not sure if it was worse for my father or my mother. I'm not sure who took that more seriously, but that was really just a prime value of theirs. So no matter how good I was, no matter what I did in other ways, it was really, really hard for my parents to see that I was anything more than a chubby girl. It was really hard for them. So I sat back here for my whole entire childhood, adolescence, feeling like I was a disappointment, that I wasn't what they wanted, that they had this vision of who their child would be, and I wasn't it. Now, I'm not telling you that that's their truth. I'm telling you that that's my truth, okay? Because they would never say, oh, that's true. They would never say that. But it was just a constant feeling on my part that I wasn't what they wanted, okay? So if you think about me sitting back here, you can understand how I developed into the person who I am. And I'm gonna go back to the podium and we're gonna talk about it on the PowerPoint. Running out of time. Okay, can you hear me? Is that good? All right. So that's me. because I'm not really a sad human, but I'm just lonely. And I'm dying to be noticed, to matter, things like that. That's me at this age that I'm talking about. I don't know how well you can see this, but my mother made that outfit for me. Yes, because she majored in dress design. And that is like a little bolero with like 2 layers and a pinafore. What's that material? Yeah, I can't remember. Organza, maybe? Yes, organza, pinafore. And I don't know if you can see this, but there's like these layers on it. I mean, it's just this intricate thing. And today, while we're all here in our spandex, you can imagine how that felt on me. Layer upon layer of stiff, uncomfortable material. But that's how we went. I think that's how it was back then, but that is for sure how it was in my car. So, I wondered, as a result of my learning, am I enough? Do other people think I'm enough? You know, my mother used to say to me, my whole childhood was about being dragged from one doctor to another to try to get me to lose weight, because my mother would say to me, like, who would want you? Okay? Yeah. So, am I good enough? All of us have a dose of, am I blank enough? And there's no human without thinking I'm not something enough. For me, it was good enough, thin enough, pretty enough, whatever. Do I matter? You know, that little girl in the back seat, I see with my children and grandchildren how we just revel in these grandchildren. It doesn't mean they don't have their stuff, but still, there's just so much about them that we love and appreciate, and there's so much input. My father, also, I didn't tell you, was an only child. So, not only was I alone in that back seat, but there was no extended family around me to provide the input that I wasn't getting from my family. So this was a double dose. Am I lovable? Am I deserving? When someone tells you, like, who would want you, then you don't think to yourself, I deserve to have someone, I'm gonna find someone, because no one has told you that. And there wasn't anybody close enough to me to do those things. So how I acted because of this is, I went along with stuff. I didn't ever have a voice to just say, I want it to be this way, so I just went along with. I didn't speak up. I still have a hard time speaking up in many, many ways. My children would tell you that. I expected little because no one told me that I could expect more than that. And I looked for love. All of my attempts from 2 years old on were to be connected to people, to be with people, to matter to people. No matter what I did in my life, I always somehow became the president of it. It just was like, it was just me creating family, really, one after another after another. And that's what happened, okay? Why does it matter? It matters because my adult work was to come to understand that I am okay. That, yes, there's lots of things that I wish I did better and lots of challenges that I have, which I've now come to refer to a lot as just like my mishigas, because we all have mishigas and we don't ever get over it all. But I do now know that I'm okay. I had a big family that was important to me. I matter to them. I know I matter to them. I matter to them very, very much. I worked hard on that to matter to them. But in order to do that, I had to know I was okay. I had to know that I could do these things, that I got to, even if I had a weight problem, that I got to. It's also important because my view of other people were that they weren't gonna like me, they were gonna be critical of me, that I wasn't enough. I can tell you just a quick funny story. I was driving with my husband, this isn't funny, but we were driving to a funeral, and we're in the car on the way to the funeral, and I am sitting there obsessing about, first of all, it was like the first time I had seen people in a long time. This was just a few weeks ago. I'm obsessing about what I'm wearing and who's gonna be there, and I should have worn this, well, wherever we go. I mean, I never am wearing the right thing. This is just what my mind does, because I was trained that it wasn't right, it wasn't good enough. So I also had to learn that you are probably not gonna judge me like the way I was judged in that car. And that if you do, that's really about you and not about me. But it's been a lot of work to learn that. It also matters because I know now that others are okay. I have my peeps, and I have a big group of peeps, and I feel pretty comfortable with them, and I make mistakes, and they still love me, and it's all cool. But I have to know that a broader group is okay. I have to. Otherwise, I'm just going to be stuck in those negative looping thoughts of, oh my gosh, your dress is too short, what's wrong with you? I mean, on and on and on. And I'm sure you can all relate to that on some level. And lastly, what I learned is that it's okay, which means that when I start into these negative thoughts, I can calm myself, I can center myself, I can understand that what's going on inside of me isn't necessarily what's going on out there. And it has been just an amazing, amazing gift to come to understand that that view of myself that I got in my car isn't the whole thing. I talk about, yes, it's a very small part of us, but there's much, much more of us than just that small part. I feel sad for my parents that they could only see that small part. I feel really sad for them. But that cannot be the guidepost for the rest of my life. And I feel thrilled to be able to know that and to be able to help people know that in my work. And that is what I do all day, every day, and I love it. So, if you understand how you got to be you, how you develop the beliefs that you have about yourself, how you think, your processes, how you judge yourself, how you worry. For some people, it's less about us and more about others, but it's all the same process. If you understand how you got to be you, you can live more intentionally, you can give and feel more love in the world, and you can have a more peaceful, rich existence within your family and your community. And that is what my book can do for you. It's a short book, it's a powerful book, but it's easy to read, and it will just help you to better understand the view of yourself that you developed in your car growing up. And for those of you that maybe have children or grandchildren, to also wonder about what their views are of themselves in their cars. And I think that my role as a grandmother is to try to figure that out with my grandchildren and give them the opposite. And that's what grandparents are for. So I thank you so much for coming and listening. The book is right out there. I am going to be signing. And does anybody have questions? Yes.
Your story is so poignant, and I'm wondering, I'm wondering how, sorry. Your story is so poignant, and I'm wondering how much of your story is in the book.
Oh, it's there.
Okay.
Yes, it's there.
So when I think about how many copies I want to buy for various people, that's what I wanted to
The
know.
story is in the book. I didn't write this book for a long, long time until I was like 70 years old because I couldn't imagine not speaking it. I didn't, but it's not spoken, but it's in there, and in the book goes into much more depth about the actual dynamics. Cars have different stories and different rules and different ways of functioning, and so you can identify not only with the car, but with how the car works. You're welcome. Good question.
Did your self-image affect how you got along in high school and college, and even how you might have met your mate?
Can you hear me? Okay. 100%. It absolutely affected me. For some reason, I don't know why, I always seem to have a boyfriend. As much as my mother couldn't believe it. I just always seem to. So it was never, I have to say that it was never the kind of thing where I was just looking for anybody to like me. But I did have it, but it's hard to be a chubby kid in high school and in college. And it's really funny because I'm like the shortest person in my friend group now, but when I grew up, I was always the tallest. And I was like just this big girl. And yeah, it very much affected me. Actually, it was an RA, I don't know RA, like a person in my dorm when I was a freshman year who I was talking to, a woman. And I went with a friend and we were talking to her and we were complaining about our mothers. And this woman said, "Oh, I just can't even imagine. You're like such great humans." I still remember that because that's how important that was to me. But yes, for sure.
So I know Ellen, I met her when I was in a really bad place in my life and she helped me. And I read the book as a pre-reader. And I'm a big reader, but I'm not a self-help reader. And I read it as a favor to her. And I was in a pretty good place in my life when I read it. But it helped. It was a gift I gave myself reading that book. And I really strongly recommend it. And I have given it as a gift. And do plan to buy more copies today and really recommend it.
Thank you. Thank you so much. The question? Oh, one more.
Do you still live in Huntington Woods?
I don't.
My wife is going to want to know because we live in Huntington Woods.
Oh, okay.
You're going to be the first question she's going to ask me.
No. I lived in a house on Huntington Road across the street from what used to be the Elephants. It's like a modern house, a modern looking house. This house was like in the Free Press. It was this, it would have to be a sought after house because it had a totally open floor plan, you know? Right, but no, I don't live there anymore. No, I moved away from Huntington Woods. I have a place in Florida. I moved to the other side of the state. There's a lot of that.
Any other questions? Yes.
Confused by a couple of things maybe I don't understand. One of the comments you made was that your mother said who would want you.
Mm-hmm.
And then another comment you made was she's a perfect person. So I'm confused by that. Those don't seem to match.
She was a perfectionist for herself, just a complete perfectionist. I mean, so much so that I never saw her without her makeup, literally until she was dying. And so she wanted to imprint perfectionism on me as well. And I did not satisfy that.
The other thing that confused me, you showed that photo of you in your childhood. Doesn't look like someone who's overweight.
I wasn't yet then. I wasn't. I got heavier and heavier as I got older and older.
Any other questions? Yes?
Yeah.
Could you repeat the question?
Yes. Did I have any relationship with my natural father? The quick story about that is that when I was 40 years old, I went into therapy, and I told this story to the therapist, and at the end of the first session, she said to me, "You're not an only child." And I said, "What?" And she said, "Well, your father, you have a stepsister, and he went on to have 2 more daughters. He said, you have 2 half-sisters." Okay? And so at that time, I always knew where he was. I always knew that he lived in Shaker Heights, Ohio. The reason why I didn't have more contact was because it would have just been intolerable for my mother. She just couldn't have handled that. But I did go to meet him. It was just an incredible experience. And I ended up meeting his daughters and became very close. One of them's name is Eleanor. I met her. Eleanor was also a heavy person. And when she met me, she said, "Oh, this is just all throughout Dad's family." Eleanor passed away. I knew her for about 3 years. It's just really sad. Anyway, yes, I did meet him. He had a completely different view of me than my parents. Question? Yes.
I have an 18-year-old daughter who is obsessed about her body weight. She's mildly overweight. She's been in therapy and spoken to numerous psychologists. She's been in weight loss programs but failed. So she has this negative self-image, and she constantly tells me she's being judged by the girls around her. She's right now studying with girls at a seminary. So I'm wondering if you would have any suggestion for someone like this who...
I do.
Yeah.
Her name is Julie Feldman. This is what she does for a living. She's a registered dietitian, but she helps people who have disordered eating, should we say that? Or a bad body image. That's what she does, and she's incredible. I would highly recommend it.
Thank you.
She works on Zoom. No, she really is incredible. I've never had anybody call me back and say, "Oh, that didn't work out for me." Ever.
Comments, questions? Coming.
You mentioned that you were overweight as a child. I was just wondering if because of the emotional messages that you were receiving, maybe that was, motivating you to find some fulfillment, whether it be through
Oh,
eating
sure.
or whatever.
Oh, absolutely. It was the only way I got fed. And my mother was just an extravagant cook and baker, and she would bake all this stuff and seal it up real tight and put it in the freezer, and I couldn't have it.
Oh,
So,
okay.
so literally, from my childhood, I never knew what it was like to eat a baked good that wasn't frozen,
Oh.
because I would go steal them from the freezer.
Yeah, because I was just thinking, my husband always says when he was growing up, his mom was a fabulous cook, and she would want him to eat everything because, she'd spend all the time. And then afterwards, he said when they were out with people, she would say, "Well, Mark is in Huskies," and let everybody know. But he said she never would put the two together, but it seems to me that food oftentimes plays a part
There's
of
no
that
question.
emotional.
Food is soothing. I mean, it was my soother. It was my soother much of my adult life. I was heavy until 20 years ago. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Someone else? Yes, Trudy.
You have a question for me? I'm so grateful to you for sharing your story because I've known you for a very long time. We were sorority sisters. We've been playing MASH together for 43 years. I mean, it's been long. And growing through those years, journeying in and out of our lives, I never would have really understood or known about your background. But this is such a awakening, not only to know you better, but to understand that all of our friends come from different places, and sometimes we don't understand their behaviors, and knowing that
what people go through sometimes, you know, it's the 4 agreements, and one of them, it's not about you,
Yes.
you know, it's about what somebody else has lived through in your interactions, and so I so appreciate what you've shared.
Thank you so much. I always say, this is the byline of my work, if you would have walked every step with someone in their life, their current behavior would make perfect sense to you. And whether it's your spouse, whether it's a friend, and you say, why are they doing that? Well, they're doing it because their history taught them to do that then. That's the answer. That's the full answer.
Anyone else? Yes.
Don't go to him.
Ellen,
Hi, Joe.
I'm so emotional hearing you talk about this. It's very meaningful. It's hard. But were you ever able to have this conversation with your mother in the place that you are now?
My mother, it started off with like me saying things to her like, I'm gonna wear what I wanna wear. And so she sort of shut up as I got older, but that was, I was married by then. My mother tried so hard to give me a different childhood than her mother gave her. And it was really her very best effort. When my mother was, well, she died when she was 83, but I would say 10 or 12 years before that, she came to me, I know you're not going to believe this, don't tell the ethics committee, as a therapist. She would come to my office and sit down and tell me about her childhood. And that was the most validating thing ever. And there was nothing that she told me that I didn't already know, but that she wanted to make this hour-long space coming to my work and talking to me about that. So that felt really good. I just understood her in the end. I mean, after a while, she just didn't have the resources. She couldn't look at herself, she couldn't be compassionate with herself, so how could she possibly be compassionate with me or understand me? And she was just terrified that I wasn't gonna get what I could have in this life, and that was just her way of doing it. Now, that's retrospectively, you know what I mean? But no, she wouldn't have understood. She really tried her hardest. My father was a whole other story. But neither one of them were just able to see me. When I went to social work school later in life, and when I was doing my internship, I did it at Jewish Family Service, and it was during the time of the O.J. Simpson trial, and Channel 4 was looking for someone to provide an interview, and I was working in this little domestic violence program at Jewish Family Service, and so someone at the agency said, would you talk to Channel 4? And I said, sure. And so the first thing I did, well, because this was my training, like I had to go out and buy a new dress. I want to tell you, I'm like so proud of myself. This is not a new dress. You have no idea. I've grown up. But anyway, I went to buy a new dress, and then I called my mother, and I said, guess what? I'm going to be on Channel 4 tomorrow in the news. And she said to me, why would they pick you? So the fact that she picked me and came to my office and wanted to talk to me, this happened for, I bet, a year, that she came to my office every week, had an appointment, charged her insurance. Again, it was nothing that I didn't know. It was just her way of honoring me somehow. So that was good.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I know I have to end it this way because you're amazing. There are so many familiar faces. I know you have a lot of friends here. But as this person said, Trudy, even if you think you know someone, you don't. And your candor, and I've heard many authors and they haven't spilled their guts out in front of any audience. Your honesty and your candor is amazing.
Thank you.
And really what you're trying to share is you can be okay also.
Right.
And please buy the book because you all have stories as well. And she'll be signing the books out in the lobby. And thank you. Our next speaker will be at 12:30, Dr. Terry Orbach. Thank you for being here with us.
Hey, that was so cool. Good. Yeah, and Michigan State that may be even happen.
That's a good thing, right? See you later.
I was just thinking that. Funny you should say that. Funny you should say that.
Thank you.